Hi, I'm Rhiannon. On our birthday, my sister got a Tiffany bracelet and a rooftop party. I got cold pizza and a match to light her candles. Years later, they asked me to give her my inheritance. When I said no, they called me selfish. But I had one final gift left, not one they could wear, but one they'd never forget. Have you ever been erased just for saying no? Let's talk about it. Drop a comment. I read every word. Our 18th birthday was the day everything became permanent. The kind of permanent that doesn't come with announcements or grand events, but with cold pizza, a single match, and the sinking feeling that I had been silently voted out of my own family. It had started sunny that morning, unnaturally warm for April in Massachusetts. Scarlett's curls bounced as she descended the stairs like a scene from a movie. Everyone clapped. Even the family dog barked happily. Me? I was already sitting in the corner, holding a crumpled napkin in my lap, watching. Scarlett's gift table sparkled with white tissue paper and light blue ribbons. A small velvet box was opened with exaggerated gasps from the aunts. A Tiffany bracelet, delicate and shining like it had been kissed by money. Dad took a photo. Mom adjusted Scarlett's hair, and then she turned to me. "Here," she said, as if handing over a forgotten receipt. A lukewarm pizza box. Pepperoni, slightly greasy. On top, taped haphazardly, was a small candle with a matchstick. "You've always preferred quiet things," Mom added. Scarlett laughed. "Well, this is so Rhiannon." They moved on without waiting for me to respond. I held the match in my fingers, turning it over. Scarlet tip, thin wooden shaft, one strike away from fire, but cold in my hand. They gave her the glow. They gave me the tool and assumed I wouldn't know what to do with it. The rooftop party carried on without me. Everyone was there. Cousins, friends from school, Scarlett's boyfriend at the time. I sat by the staircase, the paper plate on my lap now soggy with pizza grease, and watched Scarlett's champagne sparkle under the string lights. From the sliding glass door, I saw Uncle Wallace step out of the kitchen with a fresh plate in his hand. He walked over, slow and careful, like he'd been watching me for a while. "I saved you a slice of warm pie," he said. "Didn't think you'd gotten much of anything else today." I took it from him, grateful but not sure how to say it. "You okay, Rhi?" he asked. I looked out at the celebration. Scarlett was dancing barefoot with 3 girls from her track team, all laughing, all golden. "I guess this is just who I am here." He didn't correct me, just patted my shoulder and stood with me for a while. That was years ago. Seemed like a lifetime, and a different person ago. Now, I live in a small brownstone in Boston, close enough to the harbor that the smell of salt sometimes slips in through my studio windows. I run a non-profit art gallery. Nothing fancy. But it's mine. Quiet, unpretentious, just the way they always assumed I liked things. This morning, as I was making coffee, my phone lit up with a notification. A group chat I hadn't muted, because a small, masochistic part of me still hoped for inclusion. Scarlett plus Blake, rooftop engagement bash, this Saturday, sunset, can't wait to see you all. Names were tagged. Family, friends, neighbors, mine. Not one blue highlight in sight. I didn't need confirmation. I already knew the role I played in this family, present only in the margins. A footnote, if that. I walked into my bedroom and opened the drawer of my nightstand. I still had that candle tin, empty now, burned out long ago. But the matchstick? Still inside. I'd kept it all these years. Maybe it was petty. Or maybe it was survival. A reminder. They gave her a flame, I whispered to myself. They gave me the match. Maybe they thought I'd never learn how to use it. The phone buzzed again. A new message. This time, from my mother. Direct. Cold. "Please don't bring tension to Scarlett's event. She deserves peace." I stared at the screen, not blinking. The words bled into each other. Tension. Peace. Their peace. Always their peace. I closed the drawer with a soft thud and exhaled. "Of course," I said under my breath. "She always does." But I wasn't angry. Not exactly, just done waiting for permission to exist. I wasn't invited. But I went anyway. I didn't reply to Mom's text. I just sat there for a moment, staring at the candle tin in my drawer. Then I pulled out a plain charcoal dress from the back of my closet, the kind no one remembers. It didn't sparkle. It didn't ask for attention. It simply fit. I caught a lift downtown as dusk started to stretch across the Boston skyline. The driver tried to make small talk, but I wasn't in the mood. My hands rested in my lap the whole ride, cold and still. As we approached the building, I spotted valet lines curling like ribbons at the entrance. Guests in velvet and champagne-colored suits laughed under string lights. I paid the fare, stepped out, and walked toward the elevator without a word. The rooftop venue was as polished as I remembered it from the brochure Scarlett once showed me. Without asking for my opinion, just bragging. I stepped inside. No one looked up. A waiter rushed by with flutes of Prosecco. Another one, young, clearly overwhelmed, saw me near the entrance and, without hesitation, placed a tray of hors d'oeuvres in my hands. "Mini crab cakes for table 5?" he said, already turning his back. I held the tray for a second too long. And then, I set it down on a nearby table and walked toward the outer edge of the rooftop, near the planters. It was quieter there, the music more distant. The string quartet played some rendition of a pop song, but I wasn't paying attention to the melody, just the rhythm in my chest. Scarlett stood at the center of it all in a gleaming white jumpsuit, cut perfectly to her body. Her curls were styled like a bridal magazine ad, and Blake, her fiancé, looked like he'd been born in a vineyard. They were laughing, easily, loudly, surrounded by people who nodded just a little too eagerly. Our eyes met. Hers barely flinched. She raised her glass, not in greeting, not in joy. It was the kind of raise that meant, "I see you. Don't ruin this." I stayed by the planter wall, pretending to admire the view of the harbor. A few minutes passed, then she made her way over. "Oh, you came," Scarlett said, voice sugary and surprised. Blake looked between us. "Wait, this is your sister?" Scarlett gave a breezy laugh, like it was a fun little trivia fact. She likes to keep things low-key, very minimalist. She smiled like she was doing charity. Behind her, Mom appeared, clutching a stemless wine glass like it was a lifeline. Her voice came low and smooth. "We didn't want any tension tonight, Rhiannon. Scarlett's waited so long for something pure, you understand." I nodded. "Of course, who doesn't love purity?" Neither of them responded to the sarcasm. Blake, poor man, still looked confused. "You never told me you had a twin." Scarlett chuckled again. "Oh, we're not identical, not even close." And just like that, they turned. Scarlett wrapped her arm around Blake's and drifted back into the spotlight. I stood there alone, my face burning, but my spine stayed straight. A server passed by and offered me a drink, maybe out of pity. I took it, just to have something to hold. Then the toast began. Mom clinked a knife against her glass and took center stage with practiced grace. "Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight to celebrate Scarlett, our radiant, resilient girl." Her voice softened into a tremble. She's always had grace, even when things weren't easy. She's always known how to rise. I stared at the stem of my glass. Funny, I'd risen too, but no one ever made speeches for women who kept their heads down and hands working. Someone nearby whispered, "Is that Scarlett's cousin or assistant?" Uncle Wallace caught my eye from across the space. His lips moved in a silent, "I'm sorry." I gave him the faintest smile back. It wasn't his fight. It never had been. The air felt thinner suddenly, or maybe it was just me. I slipped toward the elevator. No one stopped me. No one noticed. On the ride down, the elevator hummed softly, too soft to distract from the heaviness inside me. My phone buzzed. A new photo popped up in the family group chat. Scarlett held up a lit candle, her smile flawless, one arm wrapped around Blake's waist. The caption read, "To light the way forward." In her other hand, barely visible, but I saw it, was a matchstick, my matchstick, the one I had taped to that candle tin all those years ago, the one they'd given me because, as Mom once said, "You like quiet things." They'd laughed at it then, and now it was a prop in her story. I let the elevator keep going past the lobby and down to the garage. I needed air. I needed silence. That night, after the engagement party, I curled up on my worn-out sofa with a cup of chamomile tea I barely sipped. Outside, the Boston skyline shimmered in cold indifference. But my mind had no peace. I didn't sleep, because I remembered the first time Scarlett took something of mine and never gave it back. It started the spring of senior year. I was 17, quiet, and always covered in charcoal smudges and paint under my fingernails. While other girls dreamed about prom, I stayed late after class in the art room, building my portfolio with the same fierce hope most people reserve for church. Then one day, it arrived. An envelope, heavy, cream-colored, embossed with NYU's violet seal. Inside, it said I'd been accepted into the Tisch School of the Arts with a full scholarship. Full, tuition, room, board, everything. I couldn't breathe. Mrs. Lancaster, my guidance counselor, gave me a hug so tight I dropped my pencil. "I knew you'd do it," she whispered. I went home walking on air. And for the first time in a long time, I cried. But it wasn't out of loneliness or disappointment. It was joy, pure, quiet joy. That night, I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I just folded the letter carefully and tucked it deep inside my bottom desk drawer, under a pile of sketch pads no one ever touched but me. But Scarlett always had a way of finding things that weren't hers. Exactly 1 week later, I woke up to her shrieking downstairs. "Mom, come see! I got into NYU! They picked me! I got the Tisch scholarship!" My stomach flipped. I ran down in my pajamas, heart pounding, hoping, stupidly, that it was a mistake, that she had applied too and miraculously earned the same offer. But no, there she was, holding up my letter. My name had been crossed out. Hers had been typed in. Same essay title, word for word. I had written it in the margins of a journal I thought she never read. Mom didn't even blink. She clutched Scarlett like she'd just saved a dying orphan. "You've always had the soul of an artist," she cooed. I stood there, mouth dry, letterless, futureless. Scarlett didn't even look at me. She just twirled a strand of her hair and said, "I guess they saw something special." Uncle Wallace was there that day, too. He squinted at the paper, lips twitching slightly, but said nothing. Dad was on a business trip. He was always on a business trip. I didn't say a word. Not then. A few days later, the school called me in. "We received your withdrawal," the secretary said. "Just confirming." "I never sent one," I said. She looked confused. "Well, someone did. It was signed." The handwriting was shaky, rushed, but it was close enough. When I got home, Mom was arranging flowers. She barely looked up. "It's for the best," she said. "You don't like big cities anyway." Scarlett stood by the door with 2 suitcases and a bright white NYU hoodie already zipped up to her chin. I stayed home, enrolled in state college, commuted. She went to New York. Years later, I still wonder what would have happened if I'd spoken up. If I'd marched into that room with the real letter, shoved it in someone's face. But back then, silence felt safer. Speaking up meant conflict, and conflict never went well in our house. Now, in my small apartment, surrounded by my own work, charcoal portraits, abstract sketches, ink stains on the couch, I stood before the wall where I'd framed my acceptance letter. It was old now, yellowed at the edges, a little torn. The crease in the middle had nearly split, but it was real. I had proof, even if no one else ever saw it. I reached for my sketchbook and sat by the window. The candle Scarlett had lit at the party earlier that evening still flickered in my head, its flame, its symbolism, her smug face raising the match. So I drew it. Only mine was melting, bent sideways, wax dripping uncontrollably down the table. The flame, crooked and faint. That was her version of light. A few moments later, my phone buzzed on the windowsill. "Uncle Wallace." "You did good, Ree." "I remember." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Did you know?" A pause. I suspected. I bit my lip. "Why didn't you say anything?" 3 blinking dots. Then nothing, just silence. The kind that says, "It wasn't my fight." But it should have been, because that scholarship was just the beginning. The second thing she took was worse, because this time, she didn't take it from my hands, she took it from my heart. I stared at the ceiling that night, the hum of the radiator filling the quiet. My fingers kept brushing the edge of the pillow, but sleep stayed far from me. I closed my eyes, and there he was, Micah, the only person who ever made me feel truly seen before he vanished like a name smudged off a chalkboard. It was my second year at the local state college. I hadn't planned on staying close to home, but after the whole scholarship mess, I didn't have the strength to fight again. I took a full course load, kept my head down, and poured everything into my charcoal drawings. That's how Micah and I met. Intro to literature. He sat 2 rows behind me. The professor made some awkward comment about Emily Dickinson being too morbid, and Micah spoke up. "She wasn't morbid," he said. "She was honest." I turned around. He had this shy, warm smile, the kind that didn't push. A week later, he left a folded note in my sketchbook. "Your hands draw like she writes, quiet but true." I remember reading that in the dining hall, my tray untouched. I pressed that note into the inside cover of my journal. Still have it somewhere. We didn't date like other couples on campus. No loud PDA or party snapshots. We met at the old library, exchanged playlists, and went to a diner on Tuesdays for half-price pie. It was simple, honest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to guard every word or explain who I was. Then, Thanksgiving came. Scarlett showed up, hair lighter than before, a new accent hanging off her tongue like she'd just spent a semester abroad, even though she'd never left New York. She barged in on campus with some made-up reason to surprise me, but spent most of her time asking if the cafeteria was safe to eat in and dropping hints about how NYU was too intense for the emotionally fragile. I should have seen it coming when she suggested we go to a cafe down the street. She insisted Micah come along, said she was dying to meet the boy who'd finally cracked the Ice Queen. Her words, not mine. I watched them talk that day. Her hands danced in the air, her laugh too loud, too practiced. Micah was polite, but I saw it. The flicker, the confusion, that spark she always triggered in people, like they'd been handed a brighter version of reality and didn't know how to look away. By the next week, something had changed. He stopped sending notes. Our conversations dried up. One afternoon, he walked right past me outside the art building like we'd never even met. No eye contact. Nothing. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat on the bench behind the dorms and waited for the world to make sense again. Then came the whispers. A friend in my sculpture class said she'd seen Micah and Scarlett at a party off campus. Another swore they left together. I didn't want to believe it, not because I thought Scarlett wouldn't do it, but because I'd hoped Micah was better than that. When I finally confronted her, she didn't even look surprised. "He told me he didn't know how to break it to you," she said, sipping orange juice from my mug. "So I did him a favor." My hands clenched around the back of the chair. "That's not a favor," I said, voice shaking. "That's betrayal." She shrugged, grinning like she'd won a game no one else was playing. "Oh, come on, Ree. Boys come and go. You don't need to be so dramatic." That night, I told Mom, I needed someone, anyone, to say what Scarlett did was wrong. Instead, Evelyn barely looked up from her crossword. "Boys come and go, honey," she echoed. "Focus on your future. These things don't matter in the long run." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I swallowed the ache and turned it into silence. Again. Years passed. Micah became a blur in my memory, a shape I didn't dare re-outline. Until last week. An email slid into my inbox. Boston Poetry Lecture Series, featuring Micah L. Denton. I stared at the screen, the name burning like an old scar exposed to sun. He was in Boston, less than 20 blocks from my apartment. I hovered over the RSVP button, then closed the tab. Later that night, I opened Instagram while waiting for the kettle to boil. Scarlett had just posted a throwback. Her and Micah, arms around each other, young and glowing with youth and arrogance. Caption, "Young and fearless. Those were the days." I tossed my phone face down and left the tea untouched. That should have been the end of it. Another memory folded into a drawer I never opened. But something pulled at me. Something unfinished. In the back of my closet, beneath an old shoebox of dried paint tubes, I found my ancient flip phone. I used to keep voicemails from that year. Just in case. I powered it on. The screen blinked slow and tired, like it didn't want to remember either. One message. Dated 1 week after Micah stopped returning my calls. I pressed play. Hey, Ree, it's Micah. I know I shouldn't be calling, but I didn't know what to believe. She said you were leaving the country, that you weren't coming back, that you didn't want to talk. I didn't know what was true anymore. I should have asked you. I should have trusted what we had. I'm sorry. Click. No follow-up. No second chance. I sat there for a long time, that tiny phone in my hand like it weighed 100 pounds. I wanted to scream, cry, punch a hole in the wall, but all I did was breathe, because even now I could hear her voice in the static between words, controlling the narrative, taking what wasn't hers, again. I should have stayed away. But when I saw what Scarlett did to our aunt, I knew something was wrong, something darker. It had been months since I last stepped foot inside Aunt Margot's old house. The place sat quiet on the edge of town, windows dust-frosted, and curtains drawn like a woman closing her eyes for the last time. Scarlett had listed it for sale. Of course she had, but never bothered to clear it out, so as usual, the cleanup fell to me. Duh. I parked in the gravel drive, the same one I used to skip down in bare feet every summer when I was little, but today there was no scent of lemon cookies, no humming from the kitchen, just stale air and the faint smell of old roses, like someone had tried to cover up the scent of loss and failed. Inside, boxes slumped in corners. The wallpaper in the foyer was curling like it had finally given up trying. I walked to the study, the one place Aunt Margot had always kept pristine. Books still lined the shelves, though the dust made them look forgotten. A few papers had fallen across the floor, tax forms, hospital discharge notes, and something that looked like an insurance estimate. Then I saw it. A drawer in her oak desk. Locked. Every other drawer was wide open, but not that one. I tugged at the handle. Nothing. I checked under the blotter, behind picture frames, under flower pots for a key. Still nothing. Just the quiet groan of a house that hadn't been spoken to in too long. I sat down on the love seat, the one she used to read to me from, and closed my eyes. It came back in pieces, like glass shards that didn't fit together quite right. The final few months before she passed, Scarlett had volunteered, no, insisted, on being Aunt Margot's primary contact. She moved her into a private hospice, told everyone, she's confused, crowds upset her. But when I tried to visit, Scarlett met me at the door. She doesn't remember you anymore, Ree. I don't want her distressed. I pushed past her once anyway. Found Aunt Margot sitting up in bed, thin as air, her eyes like puddles. She didn't speak, but she looked right at me, held my gaze, and her hand twitched like she wanted to reach for mine. Then Scarlett walked in and said, "She's due for a nap." And I was ushered out like a stranger who didn't belong. That was the last time I saw her alive. But before that, months earlier, I'd visited for lunch. Margot had been lucid then, clear, even joyful. I still remember what she said as I helped her with her cardigan. "You'll be fine, Ree. I've made sure of that." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally, that maybe she sensed how worn down I was. But now, looking at that locked drawer and remembering the will reading afterward, how Scarlett stood there, bold as brass, with a brand new will in hand, I knew better. "This is Aunt Margot's final request," Scarlett said that day. "I'm her sole executor and heir." Mom didn't blink. Margot always loved Scarlett like a daughter. Let it go, honey. No one asked questions. No one but me. A week later, I drove out to Newton to see Aunt Margot's former attorney. Mr. Bernard Whitmore had retired 2 years ago, but his assistant kindly set up a short meeting at his garden-facing sunroom. He greeted me in a cardigan and slippers, offered tea, and listened patiently. "I remember Margot," he said, nodding thoughtfully. "Smart woman, firm." "Did she ever have a will that named me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He tapped his temple. Yes, actually, a few years back." I drafted one that split her estate evenly between you and your sister. That's the version I expected to be filed. It wasn't. He blinked. Interesting. I wasn't the one who handled probate. Thought maybe she'd redone it with someone else. No, I said quietly. She hadn't. The sun shifted through the blinds behind him. Light caught the dust in the air, making it shimmer like falling ash. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house. I couldn't explain why. I just couldn't leave it like that. As I sorted through a pile of mismatched lamps and brittle magazines, I opened a box labeled Donate. Inside, shoved carelessly beneath folded scarves and a chipped teacup, was a metal urn. I froze. Her ashes. My breath caught. That was how Scarlett treated her. Stuffed in a box like a forgotten vase. I pulled the urn out gently, brushing the dust away. Something slipped from between the folds of fabric around it, an old photograph. Aunt Margot, younger, vibrant, stood in front of a hydrangea bush, holding a baby in her arms. Me. On the back, in her tight, elegant cursive, it read, "For my quiet one. Love, always." I sat there on the floor for a long time. I didn't take the ashes, but I took the photo. I took it home, framed it, and placed it on the windowsill above my desk, right where the morning light could reach it. I didn't need the urn to remember who she was, but now I remembered who Scarlett really was, too. And the next time I saw her, she smiled like none of it had happened and offered me tea. I should have checked the brakes before I got in her car. And Scarlett acted like nothing ever happened, like we hadn't just unearthed a box of ashes or stood in the same room where Aunt Margot once stared at me with silent, pleading eyes. She showed up the next morning wearing linen and pearls, smiling like we were going on a church picnic. "I thought a drive might clear the air," she said. "We should talk, really talk." And like a fool, I said yes. The eucalyptus scent hit me as soon as I climbed into her Audi. It mingled with peppermint, the kind that reminded me of Sunday school mints and old lady purses. She handed me a ceramic travel mug. "Chamomile," she said softly. "For the nerves." I didn't drink it. We rolled through quiet, tree-lined streets, heading east toward the coast. Scarlett kept humming under her breath, something from when we were kids, maybe a lullaby Aunt Margot used to sing when she babysat us. Scarlett's fingers tapped gently on the steering wheel, keeping time. Her nails were painted a milky lilac shade, not a chip in sight. It was quiet between us, almost peaceful, until we reached the winding road that hugged the cliffs just outside of Gloucester, the kind of road that twists without warning, all trees and blind curves and nothing but a rusted guardrail between the asphalt and a steep drop to the sea. She adjusted her scarf suddenly, glancing down at her lap. "Hey, can you press the brakes? Something feels weird." It took me a second to process what she said, but I reached for the pedal instinctively. Nothing. The brakes sank like air. "Scarlett, the brakes!" She looked up just in time to jerk the wheel. The car veered violently right, gravel spinning out beneath us, tires screamed. My shoulder slammed into the door as we skidded into a patch of soft earth just before the curve. We missed the guardrail by inches. Scarlett's hands trembled on the steering wheel, her face pale. Oh my God, maybe it's the mechanic. I told him last week something felt off." I didn't answer. I was too busy breathing. She gave a shaky laugh, brushing hair out of her eyes. "Wow, close one, huh?" I nodded, slowly. My stomach was doing flips. Not from the near miss, but from something colder. There was no mechanic's sticker on the windshield, not even an oil change record. I stayed silent, pulled out my phone, and quietly took photos of the brake pedal, the dashboard, and the undercarriage when she stepped out to catch her breath. 10 minutes later, I insisted we stop at urgent care. Told her I felt dizzy, which honestly wasn't a lie. My hands hadn't stopped shaking. Scarlett waited in the lobby, pacing in slow circles by the fish tank. I slipped outside and called Kyle. Kyle's an old friend, works out of a garage near Beacon Hill, and he doesn't ask too many questions. I texted him the make and model, sent over the photos, and told him where the car was parked. He didn't even hesitate. "I'm 5 minutes out." I sat on the curb, cold seeping through my jeans. Tried not to cry. tried not to imagine what might have happened if the road had been just a little wetter, the turn a little sharper. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Kyle, someone cut your brake lines. Recently, zip-tied the housing back together to make it look untouched. This wasn't wear and tear, This was on purpose. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words blurred. My ears felt hot. My hands went cold. Inside, Scarlett was reading a magazine, one leg crossed neatly over the other, like she was waiting for her yoga class to start. When I stepped back into the lobby, she looked up and smiled. Too wide, too sweet. Then she leaned in, lowered her voice like we were sharing a secret, and whispered, "It's exhausting, isn't it? Being the forgotten one? Always fighting to be seen." Her voice was calm, measured, like she wasn't talking about missing brakes or dead ants or forged wills, just tiredness. I didn't answer. I turned and walked out the front doors without saying another word. The wind outside bit at my face. I let it, because whatever Scarlett had just revealed, it wasn't fatigue, it was something else, and it was just getting started. I thought my silence would keep things from getting worse, but the next person she hurt didn't survive. It was just after midnight when my phone buzzed against the nightstand. I'd been half asleep, the kind where your body is heavy but your mind is still wandering through yesterday. The screen lit up. Blocked number. I stared at it for a second, debating. Something in my gut told me to answer. Rhiannon? A woman's voice, tight, trembling. Yes, who is this? This is Hannah, Ethan's sister. I'm sorry to call like this. He's in the hospital. Something happened at Scarlett's place. I sat upright, heart racing. What do you mean something happened? He fell. Down the stairs. That's what she told the paramedics, but the doctors are saying the injuries don't match a simple fall. I didn't hang up. I didn't even breathe. I just threw on yesterday's jeans, grabbed my coat and keys, and ran out the door. It was raining again. Of course it was. The kind of rain that makes the streets shine like oil and turns every red light into a glare. My hands clutched the wheel tighter than necessary. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake, a slip, a fluke. But deep down, I knew better. Scarlett never slipped. When I arrived at the hospital, Hannah met me at the sliding doors. She looked younger than I remembered, shoulders hunched, eyes wide and red from crying. "He's in ICU," she said, barely above a whisper. "They said he has a skull fracture and a broken collarbone. They had to monitor him for swelling." She led me through the corridor, the beeping of machines in other rooms clashing with the pounding in my chest. The room Ethan was in smelled sterile, disinfectant and something faintly metallic. His face was pale, bruised around the left cheekbone. Tubes trailed from his arms. He didn't look like someone who just tripped. "She said he got mad," Hannah murmured, "that he slipped trying to storm off. But I don't buy it. He's not like that." A nurse leaned in quietly. She looked like someone who'd seen too much and didn't flinch easily. "She was the one who called 911, she told me softly. But when I asked what happened, she said it with this tone, like she was annoyed to be here. Something about her doesn't sit right. The curtain pulled open just enough for me to catch a glimpse of Scarlett across the hall, sipping coffee from a paper cup like it was just another Wednesday. Her eyes met mine. She didn't look concerned. She looked bored. Later, Hannah asked if we could talk privately. We slipped into an empty consult room. "I didn't know if I should show you this," she said, pulling out her phone. "But something told me you'd understand." It was footage from a security camera, Scarlett's front hallway. Grainy, low resolution, but enough. You could hear muffled voices. Ethan's taller frame appeared near the stairwell, his hands raised in frustration. Scarlett moved toward him quickly. Then the video stuttered. 1 second he was upright, the next he was airborne, falling hard down the stairs. The camera glitched again just as she lunged, but it didn't matter. The intent was clear. She'd moved toward him, not to comfort, not to block, to shove. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The next day, I stood in Scarlett's living room again. Everything looked the same minimalist decor, the same overpriced candles, the same faux cozy blanket draped over the couch, like nothing had happened. Except now, 2 detectives stood at the doorway. Scarlett saw them, Then she looked at me. "You brought them here, didn't you?" she said, voice flat. "You always hated that he chose me." I didn't respond. "He loved me," she went on. "You know that, don't you? Not you, not you." That must sting. I wanted to scream. Instead, I let her talk. Her words said enough. That night, back at my place, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. The rain had stopped. Everything was quiet in that disorienting way right after a storm. The box sat under my nightstand, the one I'd taken from Aunt Margot's attic all those weeks ago, the one I hadn't dared open. My hands shook as I undid the latch. Inside was a worn, leather-bound notebook. Aunt Margot's handwriting, half cursive, half scratch. Most of it was diary style, notes about appointments, gardening, recipes, but tucked in the back, under a clipped photo of Scarlett at 11 years old, were entries that chilled me. "Scarlett lies for fun sometimes. Found her watching our neighbor's dog limp. She was smiling. She told me, 'It's better when people cry. Then I know they're real.' One line near the bottom stopped me cold. 'She smiles when people cry.' I didn't cry for Ethan, not at that moment. Not for Aunt Margot either. I wept because I had known, deep down, and done nothing. I'd kept quiet out of fear, and now someone else was paying for it. And this time, it wasn't just emotional scars. It was blood, bone, silence broken by a fall. By the time the hearing was scheduled, Mom had already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. I sat in the hallway outside courtroom C, elbows resting on my knees, hands twisted together in my lap. They were cold, not from the air conditioning, but from something deeper, something rooted in memories I couldn't stop reliving. I was 9 when Scarlett shoved me down the stairs for touching her Walkman. My wrist snapped on the landing. Mom looked at me, then at Scarlett, and said, "She didn't mean it. You shouldn't have touched her things." That night, I held my fork with my left hand at dinner while Mom refilled Scarlett's lemonade. Not once did she ask if I was in pain. Now, decades later, the courtroom door felt like the same closed door I'd known my whole life, only this one had the state seal engraved on it. When the clerk finally called us in, I walked stiffly to the wooden bench. I sat alone, second row. 2 rows ahead, Scarlett walked in, her hands cuffed at the waist, eyes searching the room until they landed on me. She tilted her head, half a smirk playing on her lips, like this was just another performance. Beside her, Mom clutched a prayer book, wore navy like it was a funeral. She didn't look back, didn't glance my way. Her body leaned toward Scarlett's as if proximity could somehow transfer innocence. The judge's voice cut through the silence. "We are here today to review the charges of aggravated assault against Scarlett Iverson. Ms. Iverson, you are entitled to representation and to speak on your own behalf." Scarlett's lawyer was a wiry man with the kind of voice that never quite matched his suit. He launched into statements about stress, mental health, and emotional provocation. It all sounded practiced, sterile, like Ethan wasn't a real person, but just a footnote in someone else's meltdown. Then the prosecution stood. They played the footage, muted audio. Ethan standing by the stairwell, shoulders tense, Scarlett approaching. Her hand rose, then the screen glitched just as he stumbled backward. The sound returned right before the thud. A hush fell across the room. Someone in the back gasped. Scarlett's lawyer stood again. "We would ask the court to consider Mr. Gray's unstable mental state at the time. He had been under emotional distress, which may have impaired judgment." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just sat, staring at my sister. She never looked away. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. Then the judge asked, "Would any family members like to speak as a character witness?" There was a beat of silence. Then my mother stood. She walked slowly to the stand, her prayer book still in hand like a shield. She placed it gently on the edge of the witness box and cleared her throat. "Scarlett has always been sensitive," she said, voice quivering just enough. "She was a delicate child, so bright, so gifted. But she struggled. Rhiannon?" Her eyes scanned the room but didn't stop on me. "She's always been different, quieter, more distant." The prosecutor frowned. "Ma'am, Are you implying that Ms. Rhiannon Iverson is somehow responsible for the events in question? I'm saying. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper, trembling now. But it wasn't grief. It was rehearsed. I think the tension between them, years of bitterness, it made things harder for Scarlett. I believe that played a part. That did it. I didn't wait for cross-examination. I stood quietly and left the courtroom. The air outside was heavy, and the sky threatened rain. Reporters stood behind barricades. Microphones rose like weeds as I stepped down the courthouse stairs. One woman leaned in, notepad poised. "Are you the sister?" I paused. Then, softly but clearly, "No, I'm just someone who survived her." The words left my mouth like a release, like truth finally found its voice. Back home, I slipped off my shoes by the door. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the fridge. I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a book of matches, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a birthday card, last year's. Mom had mailed it but never signed it. Just a printed message. "Hope your day is filled with joy. Love, Mom." I struck the match, watched the flame take the edge of the paper, held it over the sink until it curled into black. It didn't make things better, but it ended something. I thought that was the end of it, until the call came from the psychiatric facility. It was a Tuesday. Late afternoon, the kind where the shadows stretch long across the floor and the sun hits the windows just right, golden, heavy, almost too gentle for the kind of news I was about to receive. The voicemail was short. "This is Westbridge Mental Health Institute. We're calling to notify you that Scarlett Iverson has requested to send correspondence to your address. It was approved by the reviewing psychologist. The letter was placed in the mail today." That was all. I sat with it for a moment, unsure if I felt dread, or just the faint ache of a bruise you forgot you had. 2 days later, it came. The envelope was cream-colored, thick like stationery from another era. My name was written in narrow cursive, a little shaky. The return address confirmed it, Westbridge. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my kitchen counter for hours while I vacuumed, while I made soup I didn't finish, while I rearranged the bookshelf in the hallway just to keep from thinking. But sometime after dinner, I finally sliced it open. Yang, inside was a folded piece of paper, handmade, like something from an old art class. On the front, drawn in bright crayon, 2 little girls. One was smiling, the other was crying. Above them, in red marker, the words, "Happy birthday to the one who stayed." I felt my throat tighten as I turned it over. The handwriting was erratic, swirling in and out of neatness, like her mind couldn't decide whether to make peace or burn bridges. "You always got under my skin. They looked at you like a smudge I couldn't erase. And I tried. Every birthday I wished you gone. But somehow you stayed. And somehow, they still gave you what I wanted. Their pity. Their guilt. Their sideways glances. Even now, you're still here. You're still standing. And maybe that's what I never understood. I broke everything I touched. And yet, you never disappeared. You won." There was no love, Scarlett. No apology. Just a finality that didn't ask for forgiveness and didn't try to justify. I reread it once, twice, folded it neatly, and placed it in the drawer by the door. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove toward the coast. It wasn't planned. I just got in the car and let the road guide me. Past the city limits, past the farmers' market tents on the side of the road, past the small diners where the same 3 men probably sat drinking the same coffee every morning. Eventually, I parked where the cliffs opened up, where the rocks dropped straight into the sea. My aunt used to bring me here when I was little, especially on days when the world felt like too much. She said the ocean didn't fix things. It just made them feel smaller. Like your pain had somewhere to go. I sat on the hood of the car, letter in hand, knees pulled to my chest. The wind tore through the paper like it already knew what I needed to do. One tug, and it was airborne, cartwheeling through the sky before it dropped into the waves and vanished. It didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel like closure. It felt quiet And for once, that was enough. Back home that evening, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll. I didn't answer messages. I went into the kitchen, pulled out a small boxed cake mix, and started baking. It was our birthday, after all. I made it simple, just a round vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. No writing on top. No names. No decorations. Just mine. I lit one candle. This time, not with a matchstick from a drawer, but with a silver lighter engraved with my name. A gift I had once bought for myself and forgotten in a drawer. It felt right. I ate a slice in silence, not out of sadness, just presence. No guilt, no obligation, no pretending. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Mom. She didn't even say hello. "I hope one day you'll stop being so dramatic, Rhiannon. You didn't need to turn everything into a war." I stared at the phone for a second, thumb hovering. Then I deleted it. No pause. No second thoughts. Instead, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked against a blank page. And then I typed, "The twin who wasn't chosen." And beneath it, the first sentence. I never wanted revenge. I wanted peace. And now I have it. That was the real inheritance. Not the money, not the titles, not their guilt. It was this. A quiet room, a steady breath, and the freedom to write my own ending. Have you ever been erased by your own family? What would you have done if you were me? Let me know in the comments. I read every one.